Have you ever wondered why some men seem to radiate unusual energy, razor-sharp focus, and consistent achievement, while others appear permanently drained, no matter how much they sleep or rest? The answer isn't luck. It isn't genetics. It may lie in an ancient secret that most of us have completely overlooked. Today, we're opening a conversation that many consider taboo, a topic that's never taught in schools, rarely discussed between friends, yet one that was deeply embedded in the philosophies of the world's greatest civilizations, from ancient China and India to Greece and the Islamic Golden Age. We're talking about semen retention, known in Western circles as nofap or the semen retention practice. But let's be clear from the start, we are not here to give you a religious prescription or to judge anyone's choices. We're here to lay out the complete picture, the science, the spirituality, the psychology, and let you decide for yourself. In this summary, you'll discover what researchers say about retention's impact on testosterone and dopamine. You'll understand why ancient philosophers and warriors linked sexual discipline to greatness. And you'll also hear the other side, the scientific critiques and medical concerns that deserve serious attention. We're not selling you an illusion. We're building awareness with you. If you believe that knowledge is the most powerful tool a human being can possess, then Wiser Reads is your home. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell because every video here is one step closer to a sharper, more conscious version of yourself. Get ready. The summary starts now. Why is this topic surrounded by silence? Search this topic online and you'll find one of two extremes, either religious content condemning it outright or adult content exploiting it from the opposite direction. The calm, objective scientific conversation is nearly non-existent, and that fact alone is worth pausing on. The silence surrounding this subject is not an accident. It's the product of accumulated layers of culture, commerce, and social taboo. First, the power of consumer culture. We live in an era where the adult entertainment industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually. That industry doesn't benefit from a man who controls his urges. It benefits from a man driven by them. When someone begins talking about conscious sexual self-discipline, they're threatening a massive economic model. That explains a significant part of the systematic suppression of this conversation. Second, the confusion between health and morality. The moment this topic is raised, it transforms into a battleground, believers on one side, secularists on the other. Neutral science disappears in the middle. No one wants to be labeled, so most people choose silence. Third, the absence of funded research. Modern medicine follows the money. Research is funded where commercial interests exist. Semen retention doesn't serve any pharmaceutical company or sellable product, so no one funds it. The result, a scarcity of specialized academic studies, giving skeptics a permanent excuse to say there's no scientific evidence. Fourth, social embarrassment. Even in the most open-minded societies, discussing personal sexual habits remains deeply uncomfortable. A man who decides to practice retention can't mention it to friends without risking ridicule or awkward questions. So he stays silent, and personal experiences remain confined to private forums and closed online groups. The silence around this topic is not proof of its worthlessness. It's often proof of how complex and threatening it truly is. Real awareness doesn't begin with answers. It begins with the courage to ask difficult questions in the face of imposed silence. What is semen retention, and where does it come from? Before judging or praising, we need to understand. Most debates around this topic fail for one reason. People argue about something they haven't clearly defined yet. What exactly is semen retention? At its core, it's a conscious decision made by a man to abstain from ejaculation for a defined or open-ended period, whether by avoiding masturbation, engaging in sexual activity without reaching climax, or both.
The key point, this isn't a dysfunction or a medical condition. It's a deliberate, voluntary practice with specific goals set by the practitioner. It shouldn't be confused with total sexual abstinence. Some practitioners maintain normal marital lives, but consciously control the moment of ejaculation, while others choose complete abstinence for varying periods. Its roots in ancient civilizations. What surprises many people is that this practice isn't a modern invention born in internet communities. Its roots run deep into human history. In ancient China, Taoist medicine spoke of the concept of Jing, the essential life force. Ancient physicians believed semen carried this vital energy, and preserving it extended life and clarified the mind. Entire Taoist love arts were developed to teach men how to maintain intimacy without losing this energy. In India, the concept of Brahmacharya in Hindu philosophy described sexual control as a foundational pillar on the path to spiritual wisdom. Warriors, athletes, and scholars in ancient Indian society practiced it during pivotal life phases to prepare for great challenges. In the ancient West, the Greek philosopher Pythagoras held that a man must be very careful about how he expends his sexual energy. Historians record that some Olympic champions abstained from sex before major competitions because their coaches believed it granted them additional strength and mental sharpness. Even in Islamic and early Christian traditions, teachings exist that encourage sexual self-mastery, describing it as a path to spiritual clarity and strength of will, though the religious context differs from the health-focused discussion we're having here. In the 20th century, this idea resurfaced through Western thinkers and coaches, then gained enormous momentum with the rise of nofap communities online after 2011, when thousands began documenting their personal experiences and tracking the transformations they observed.
Physical benefits: energy, strength, and general health. Let's set the right context from the start. The human body is not a simple machine. The chemical and hormonal interactions within it are far more complex than any single theory can fully describe. But there are documented physical phenomena reported by practitioners with such consistency and similarity that they become difficult to dismiss. Physical energy, more than just a feeling. The first thing the majority of practitioners notice is a significant rise in their daily energy levels. They're not talking about a passing burst after a cup of coffee. They describe a quiet, sustained energy that extends throughout the entire day. The logical explanation? Sperm production is a metabolically expensive process. The body consumes proteins, zinc, and nutrients with every ejaculation. When that recurring expenditure stops, those resources are redirected toward other bodily functions. Physical strength and recovery. Some observations suggest that athletes who practice retention notice improvements in their endurance and the speed of their muscular recovery after training. This isn't far from scientific logic. Zinc, lost with each ejaculation, is a mineral essential to protein synthesis and muscle cell regeneration. A body that retains its zinc reserves has more resources available for tissue repair and strength building. Skin, hair, and general appearance. An aspect many don't anticipate: improvements in skin texture and hair vitality. This too is tied to the same zinc and proteins, both essential to the health of skin, hair, and nails. Some practitioners describe their faces looking noticeably fresher and more vibrant after extended retention periods, which they link to improved circulation and elevated hormone levels. Immune health. The immune system also enters this conversation. Zinc is well known for its central role in immune function. Some studies suggest that frequent ejaculation may affect blood zinc levels in ways worth noting, particularly in men who don't compensate for this loss through diet. A necessary warning:
None of the above means abstinence is a universal miracle cure. Bodies vary from person to person. The science here is still in the stage of observation rather than definitive proof. And that's a fundamental distinction that must stay at the front of your mind as you read these benefits.
Psychological benefits, self-discipline, and mental focus. If physical benefits are what draw people to this path, psychological benefits are what keep them on it. Men who have practiced retention over long periods speak of transformations in their character and thinking that run far deeper than any physical change, and this is the dimension that deserves our most serious attention. Dopamine, the hidden paxis of the entire story. To understand the psychological benefits, we must first understand dopamine's role. This neurotransmitter is your brain's reward chemical, responsible for the feeling of motivation and the drive to pursue goals. The problem, repeated masturbation releases massive amounts of dopamine in a very short time without any real effort. This gradually leads to what neuroscientists call downregulation of dopamine receptors. Your brain requires increasingly higher doses to feel the same level of pleasure, while other life activities begin to feel flat and unrewarding by comparison. When that artificial, repetitive stimulation stops, the brain gradually begins reclaiming its natural sensitivity. Simple things regain real value and pleasure: reading a book, a deep conversation, the satisfaction of completing a difficult task. Mental focus and presence of mind. One of the most consistently reported experiences is a noticeable improvement in the ability to concentrate for extended periods. A mind that once scattered easily, jumping from thought to thought, becomes calmer and more capable of diving deep into a single task. This makes sense when we understand that a significant portion of mental energy was previously consumed by the recurring desires and fantasies that regular masturbation feeds. Self-discipline as a muscle that grows. Here lies perhaps the deepest psychological benefit of all. At its core, retention is a daily exercise in delaying immediate gratification in favor of a longer-term goal. This skill, the ability to say no to an instant impulse, is precisely what distinguishes high achievers across every field of life. A man who learns to govern his most powerful primal urges finds that his discipline naturally extends to every other area of his life: his eating, his time, his decisions, his relationships. Self-confidence and social presence. Many also report a growing sense of confidence and presence in social interactions. It's not about arrogance. It's a kind of quiet inner composure that comes from feeling in control of oneself. A man who knows he governs his own desires carries himself differently in front of others. The impact on testosterone levels. There is no topic in this entire debate that stirs more scientific controversy than this one. Everyone talks about testosterone, but very few truly understand what the research actually says and what it stays silent about. So let's walk through this carefully and honestly. What is testosterone and why does it matter? Testosterone is not simply the masculinity hormone, as popular discourse often reduces it. It's a multi-dimensional hormone that influences muscle mass, bone density, energy levels, mood, motivation, cognitive ability, and even a man's boldness in decision-making. Higher testosterone doesn't just mean greater physical strength, it means greater mental and emotional vitality. The study that opened the door. In 2003, a Chinese scientific journal published a study that has since become a recurring reference in this debate. It tracked testosterone levels in a group of men during a period of abstinence from ejaculation. The result was striking. On the 7th day of abstinence specifically, testosterone levels recorded a notable spike of approximately 45% above baseline before gradually returning to normal levels. This temporary spike is what many retention advocates have built their claims on. What this study does not say. This is where scientific honesty begins. The study observed a temporary spike. It did not prove that long-term retention maintains elevated testosterone permanently. The sample size was also limited, and the results have not been consistently replicated in subsequent research. The claim that retention chronically raises testosterone is a conclusion that goes well beyond what the available data actually supports. The androgen receptor concept, the forgotten angle. But there's another angle that receives far too little attention: androgen receptors. Some research suggests that abstinence may increase the density of testosterone receptors in the body's cells, meaning the body becomes more responsive to the testosterone already present, even if blood levels don't rise. In other words, it's not always about the quantity of the hormone, but how efficiently the body uses it. The honest scientific bottom line. The science says there is a documented temporary spike in the first week and a reasonable possibility of improved hormonal responsiveness over the long term, but it does not say that retention is a permanent testosterone factory. The gap between these two claims is enormous, and whoever ignores it is selling you a fantasy, not science. Sexual energy, achievement, and productivity. Is there truly a link between what happens in the bedroom and what a man accomplishes in his professional and creative life? The answer isn't simple, but it is fascinating. The concept of sublimation, when energy transforms. Psychology has recognized the term sublimation since Freud's time. It describes the process by which a person channels raw primal energy into creative, intellectual, or elevated physical output. Freud himself believed that many of civilization's greatest achievements are, at their core, sexual energy that was directed toward noble goals rather than consumed directly. This isn't mythology, it's an established psychological concept, though its specific application to semen retention still requires more study. Transformed energy in the lives of the greats. What's remarkable is that many of history's most creative minds spoke openly about the connection between sexual discipline and their productive capacity. Nikola Tesla, the genius who transformed our relationship with electricity, chose complete celibacy and said it gave him an exceptional capacity for concentration. Mahatma Gandhi practiced Brahmacharya and explicitly linked it to the strength of his will and the power of his leadership. These are not coincidences, they're a recurring pattern across civilizations and centuries. What today's high performers say. In the modern era, a growing number of entrepreneurs, athletes, and artists have begun speaking publicly about their experience with retention and its impact on their output. The common thread in their testimonials: the energy once consumed by repeated sexual stimulation became available for other things. They work longer hours, think with greater clarity, and feel a stronger drive toward their goals. The neurological explanation. When the brain stops receiving easy, fast dopamine hits, it doesn't sit idle. It spontaneously begins seeking other sources of reward and satisfaction. And that's where the secret lies. Many practitioners find themselves instinctively pulled toward their postponed goals, their forgotten projects, their ambitions that once seemed distant. The brain needs a reward. Close one door, and it searches for another. The limits of this relationship. But let's be completely clear. Retention alone accomplishes nothing. The energy released needs a clear direction, real work, and sustained discipline. A man who practices retention and then sits in front of entertainment screens for hours will see no meaningful difference. Retention is not a magic solution, it's fuel. And fuel alone doesn't move the car if there's no driver who knows where they're going.
In spiritual philosophies and ancient civilizations, what is truly astonishing is not that one civilization discussed this practice, it's that geographically and chronologically distant civilizations, with no contact between them, arrived at strikingly similar conclusions. This global convergence deserves deep reflection. The ancient Egyptians, the creative energy of the cosmos. In ancient Egyptian mythology, the god Atum was depicted creating the universe from his own sexual energy. This cosmic symbol reflects how the ancient Egyptians viewed sexual energy as a force of creation and innovation of immense value, not to be squandered carelessly. Priests in the great temples observed strict periods of abstinence before performing sacred rites, believing that physical purity opened the doors to communion with the spiritual world. The Aztec civilization, the complete warrior. In ancient Mesoamerica, Aztec warriors followed strict protocols before great battles that included complete sexual abstinence. This was not mere tradition, it was a deeply held belief. The warrior's vital energy, if preserved within his body, would grant him unbreakable courage and exceptional sharpness in combat. Great military commanders were partially defined by their capacity for this strict discipline. The Jewish Kabbalah, the secret of the inner light. In Jewish mystical philosophy, the Kabbalah speaks of the concept of Yesod, the foundational center, which in many interpretations symbolizes sexual energy and generative power. The sages of this tradition believed that preserving this energy and directing it towards study, prayer, and spiritual creation represented one of the highest degrees of human elevation. The Christian Knights, chastity as spiritual weaponry. In medieval Europe, the vows of chastity taken by knights and monks carried both a spiritual and a military dimension. The famous Knights Templar saw mastery over the body as an indispensable exercise for building the spiritual will that made a warrior fearless in the face of death on the battlefield. The common thread across all these civilizations. Despite their differences in religion, language, and geography, these civilizations all seem to have recognized the same truth. A man's vital energy is a limited and precious resource, and conscious stewardship of it makes a fundamental difference in the quality of his existence.
Scientific criticism and modern medical opinion. Until now, we've been examining the arguments in favor of retention, but genuine awareness is only complete when we hear the other side with equal fairness and attention. Modern medicine has things to say, and some of them deserve to make you stop and think seriously. The official medical position. Major medical associations, such as the American Urological Association, do not recognize semen retention as a recommended healthy practice. Their official stance rests on the absence of sufficient clinical evidence to substantiate the claimed benefits. This is a legitimate scientific position that cannot be dismissed by saying science doesn't understand everything. The prostate health concern. This is the most serious and best documented scientific criticism. A study published by the American Cancer Society Journal followed tens of thousands of men over many years and concluded that men who ejaculate more frequently show lower rates of prostate cancer. The proposed explanation, regular ejaculation helps flush the prostate's ducts of substances that might accumulate and pose a long-term risk. This is not a personal opinion, it's statistical data from a large-scale study. Physical congestion and discomfort.
Medicine also discusses a well-known phenomenon popularly called blue balls, a physical discomfort resulting from repeated arousal without release. While generally temporary and not dangerous, it does demonstrate that the body responds to a state of retention in ways that are not always comfortable. The psychological warning: obsession instead of discipline. Psychologists point to a danger that retention advocates rarely address sufficiently. Some men shift from a healthy, conscious practice to a pathological obsession, monitoring themselves with excessive anxiety, experiencing acute guilt at any relapse, and turning their lives into a constant psychological battle rather than a space of freedom and self-mastery. This pattern bears structural similarities to obsessive-compulsive control disorders. The practitioner's response. Supporters respond that most of these criticisms conflate chronic total abstinence with conscious temporary retention, and that prostate studies don't distinguish between types and sources of ejaculation. This remains a legitimate scientific debate that has not yet been definitively resolved. What you need to keep in mind. Modern medicine doesn't say retention is necessarily harmful, but it also doesn't say it's completely safe and beneficial. We are standing in the gray zone right now, and in such zones, personal awareness and medical consultation become more important than any general rule.
How to start and possible side effects to know. Reaching this chapter means you've moved past curiosity and started thinking seriously about the experience. And this is precisely where many people fail, not because the idea is wrong, but because they enter without a clear roadmap or realistic expectations. The right starting point: clarity before commitment. The first step isn't abstinence, it's defining your reason with complete clarity. Why do you want to try this? Do you want to improve your focus, build stronger self-discipline, enhance your physical energy, or perhaps personal, spiritual reasons? A clear reason is what will keep you steady when the urge intensifies, because commitment without purpose is a guaranteed recipe for early failure. The first week, the real battle. The vast majority of those who try this path agree that the first 7 days are consistently the hardest. The body is accustomed to a specific cycle and demands it forcefully. You'll feel increasing tension, possibly disturbed sleep, and repetitive, insistent thoughts. This is completely normal. It's a sign that your nervous system is recalibrating. The common mistake is interpreting this discomfort as evidence that the idea is wrong, when in reality, it's evidence that you were in an addictive loop you're trying to exit. Practical strategies for holding on. Experienced practitioners recommend 3 simultaneous axes. First, fill the void. Idle time is the enemy of this experience. Engagement in sport, reading, and meaningful work channels accumulated energy into constructive outlets. Second, reduce triggers. Limit exposure to arousing content, both digitally and physically, because the brain responds to visual stimuli powerfully and immediately. Third, get sufficient sleep. Exhaustion weakens willpower in a way that is acute and scientifically documented. Side effects to know in advance. Vivid, intense dreams increase noticeably during periods of abstinence and can be disturbing for some people. Nocturnal emissions may occur spontaneously. This is a natural physiological response involving no guilt or failure. Mood swings are strongly present in the first phases, with the practitioner alternating between bursts of high energy and episodes of irritability and restlessness. Some men feel a mild pelvic pressure due to vascular congestion, generally temporary. When should you stop? If the experience transforms from a liberating practice into a source of constant anxiety and chronic guilt, that is a clear signal deserving serious attention.
The goal is always a more conscious and free life, not a more constrained and psychologically pressured one. Real stories from practitioners around the world. Statistics give you numbers, but human stories give you the truth you can actually feel. In this chapter, we step away from the theoretical framework and listen to the voices of men from different backgrounds, varied cultures, and different ages, all brought together by one experience and led by it to outcomes they never anticipated. Ahmed, 34, engineer from Cairo. Ahmed says he began the experience with a great deal of skepticism after reading about it on a specialized Arabic forum. He had been suffering from chronic mental dispersion that was hampering his work and professional ambitions. After 3 weeks of retention, he noticed a strange shift. He found himself returning to a book project he had abandoned 2 years earlier. He openly admits he doesn't know whether the cause was retention specifically or simply the effect of the general discipline he had built, but he knows something had genuinely changed. Marcus, 28, Brazilian athlete. Marcus came to this experience through sport, not philosophy. His coach told him that some athletes practice abstinence before major competitions to improve performance. Marcus tried it for a full month and recorded his observations daily. He says the most important thing he noticed wasn't physical strength, it was something harder to describe, a kind of mental presence in high-pressure moments that allowed him to make faster, calmer decisions on the field. Keanu, 41, teacher from New Zealand. Keanu's story is different because it carries the other side of the picture. He started with great enthusiasm and held on for 6 weeks, but describes that period as one of the most stressful and anxious of his life. He says he became hypersensitive to any trigger, and his relationship with his wife became strained due to accumulated emotional congestion. He stopped and made the decision to practice conscious intimacy while simply reducing masturbation without total abstinence. He describes this as finding his true balance. What these stories say collectively. The common thread across all these experiences is not the outcome, it's the awareness. Every one of these men came out of the experience knowing himself better than he did before, whether he continued or stopped. And that in itself is the deepest lesson everyone learned. A conscious experience, even when it reveals it isn't right for you, gives you something that ignorance never can: self-knowledge.
We've arrived together at the end of this exceptional journey, a journey that took us from the depths of human history into the corridors of modern science, from ancient spiritual philosophies to living personal experiences. Before we part, let's put everything into one honest balance. What have we truly learned? We've learned that this subject runs far deeper than popular culture suggests, whether from those who dismiss it superficially or those who idolize it without reflection. The truth, as we've seen it, sits in a place far more complex and far richer than any ready-made answer. Science says there are documented effects, but they are not definitive in every dimension. History says the world's great civilizations gave this subject serious attention that cannot be ignored. And psychology says that self-discipline, whatever its domain, is one of the most powerful tools for building human character. What nobody tells you? Nobody tells you that this practice is not a magic solution, nor a ready-made prescription that works for every person in every circumstance. The human body is complex, and the human soul even more so. What works for one person may not suit another. Real awareness doesn't mean following everything you hear. It means possessing the tools of critical thinking that allow you to evaluate what suits your life specifically. The deepest lesson from this entire journey? The deepest lesson we take from all of this has nothing to do with semen retention. It has everything to do with the nature of human consciousness itself. The conscious human being is the one who questions, who doubts, who searches, and who refuses to let others think the great questions on their behalf. Whether you decide to explore what we've discussed or to step away from it entirely, what matters is that you are now making your decision based on real knowledge, not ignorance, fear, or social pressure. The decision is yours alone. No one has the right to decide for you how you live your body, your energy, your life. All that any book, any channel, or any teacher can do is place the most complete picture possible in front of you and then leave you free. And that is exactly what we have tried to do with you in every chapter of this summary. If you've stayed with us until these final words, you're not just a viewer, you are someone who seeks genuine awareness in a world full of noise. Wiser Reads was built for you, exactly for you. Subscribe now and tell us in the comments what surprised you most in this summary. Your comment might be the spark that lights the way for someone else on the same path.